Some Pokemon exist to do one specific thing and that's it. They can't do anything else. Either because they're bad at doing other things, or they don't have the capacity to do other things. They lack the options necessary to do anything else. I recently made a video about the concept of 4 move slot syndrome in competitive Pokemon, which is when a Pokemon has so many options that they can't fit all of them on one moveset. But today I'm talking about the exact opposite thing. These are one-trick ponies, Pokemon that have such limited options that they are forced to do just one thing. And if these Pokemon have any moveset variety, it usually has very little impact on what they're actually doing. The clearest example of a one-trick pony in competitive Pokemon would have to be Wobbuffet, in my opinion. Wobbuffet has one of the smallest move pools in all of Pokemon. It can only learn 8 moves. Notably, Wobbuffet has absolutely no direct attacks in its moveset. It also lacks any status moves like Toxic, and the only way for Wobbuffet to actually damage the enemy is by reflecting damage back to them. Wobbuffet learns Counter, which is a physical move with negative priority. And if you are struck by a physical attack on the turn that you use this move, you will reflect back double the damage that you just received. Mirror Coat operates very similarly, but for special attacks. If struck by a special attack on the turn it's used, you will return double damage back to the enemy that attacked you. And Wobbuffet is designed specifically around this damage reflection concept, because even its stats play into this concept. Wobbuffet has a massive HP stat of 190 base HP, but low defenses of 58 in each. So Wobbuffet in essence is quite bulky, it can tank hits well, but the actual HP amount that it takes is a lot because its defenses are low. So the amount of damage reduction in a raw number value is not quite there, but it can tank a hit and reflect a significant amount of damage back because it has such a high amount of HP to take damage with. So Wobbuffet is built around reflecting damage back to the enemy, and that's all it can really do. This concept would not work if not for Wobbuffet's ability, which is Shadow Tag. Shadow Tag is an incredibly powerful ability that will prevent the opponent from being able to switch. It will trap them on the field. And thanks to this ability, the enemy can't just switch out to avoid this counter or mirror coat. They have to do something to Wobbuffet. Sometimes they are forced to attack Wobbuffet. They have no choice. So the trapping specifically plays into this design. And Wobbuffet also has the move Encore, to force the target to repeat the move that they just used. This can ensure that Wobbuffet uses the correct reflective move, because you can Encore them and see exactly what they're locked into. They can't switch out, and you follow up with the perfect counter or mirror coat to eliminate them. These 3 moves are the basis for Wobbuffet's set, and there is a bit of moveset variety in the final slot, because the final slot is sort of a flex pick. It's less important, but Safeguard is one of the options you can go with. Safeguard is a not commonly seen screen effect that will shield your party from status ailments for 5 turns. The reason this is useful is because Wobbuffet, if it encores the enemy into a status ailment, cannot eliminate them with counter or mirror coat, but it can safeguard so that the ally that switches in will not be affected by the status ailment, since they are shielded by the safeguard. Another option, and probably the more common option on Wobbuffet, is Destiny Bond, which is a move that when selected will bring the enemy with you into the underworld if they happen to KO you on that turn. If you use Destiny Bond and the enemy attacks you and defeats you permanently, you will both be paying a visit to the great Hades who lives under the earth. Wobbuffet can utilize the Kustap Berry item to get a bit more out of Destiny Bond. Kustap Berry is an item that causes you to move first in your priority bracket if you're at 1/4 of your max HP or less. So when Wobbuffet is down to lower health, it can click Destiny Bond first, thanks to the Kustap Berry, and then bring the attacker with it, to at least trade when it's closer to death. So Wobbuffet, I think, is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Its options are literally as limited as you can get, almost. It only has 8 moves it can possibly learn, and it's designed with this particular thing that it can do in mind. But Wobbuffet is also an example of limited options not necessarily being a bad thing if the one thing that you can do is extremely powerful. You could say that Wobbuffet is perfectly aligned with the Tao. He understands his purpose in accordance with nature and is therefore an incredibly powerful entity. Wobbuffet is actually a universally banned Pokemon in Smogon's competitive singles formats because of its reliable ability to trap and eliminate enemies. With its excellent success rate at eliminating a Pokemon with the Encore counter and Mirror Coat combo, as well as the Kustap Destiny Bond, Wobbuffet in most games will actually trade 2 for 1. It will eliminate 2 enemies, and it can often choose what to eliminate through careful pivoting. Even legendary Pokemon are not safe from the omen of death that is a Wobbuffet switching onto the field. No matter who you are, Wobbuffet can probably live a hit and strike you back lethally with a reflective move, or you bring you down to the depths of hell with it, thanks to Destiny Bond. Wobbuffet is a pretty prominent Pokemon in both Gen 3 and 4 Ubers, which are formats filled with legendaries. This goes to show the incredible power of refusing your enemy the ability to leave. Escaping from a bad situation is a common tactic in all forms of combat, I think. If you're outnumbered, if your enemy has like a sword or something, you probably should run away. That's the best option. Wobbuffet, even though it's sort of a funny punching bag with little options, it prevents you from being able to run away from the combat situation, and it can use this to its advantage for incredibly elite level power. Another clear example of a one-trick pony is Shedinja, I would say. Shedinja is a very novel Pokemon that many of you are probably familiar with because of its extremely unique design, probably the most uniquely designed Pokemon in the whole series. Shedinja is hard-coded to just have 1 point of HP, which is of course very bad, but this is offset thanks to its outstanding ability, Wonder Guard, which is the best ability in the game. Wonder Guard grants a complete immunity to all attacks that are not super effective. So it's immune to most attacking types in the game. This is where its defensive value comes from, but of course, as a bug ghost type, it is weak to a lot of types, and those types will end Shedinja's life in a single hit. Fire type attacks, Ghost, Dark, Rock type attacks, Flying type attacks will all end Shedinja instantly. Shedinja will also die to any residual damage from things like Sandstorm or Hail or Poison or Spikes. All of those will defeat Shedinja, but in some cases, Shedinja can hard wall things if they don't have a status move. If Sand is not active, and if they have no super effective attacks, Shedinja can just sit there forever. And therefore, Shedinja's kind of a one-trick pony because that's its express purpose, to wall very specific things thanks to its ability Wonder Guard and just kind of sit there. It almost doesn't matter what moves it has. The important part is just walling things with Wonder Guard. The most important moveset option is probably Will-O-Wisp because it has the most direct impact. Will-O-Wisp applies burn to the target. It's a nice way to leverage the defensive entry points that Shedinja offers, and Shedinja can do a bit of damage with Shadow Sneak and X-Scissor, decent physical stab options. Shadow Sneak has priority, and you can boost up with Swords Dance in the right scenario. If nothing on the enemy team can defeat you, this can be a win condition, but really the moveset options pale in comparison to just the purpose of Shedinja being to sit there against things that can't attack it. Now, Shedinja is usually ranked very low in competitive Pokemon. It is not that hard to eliminate a Shedinja. Entry hazards are everywhere, of course. Most Pokemon teams will carry some sort of status-inflicting move like Toxic or Will-O-Wisp. But Shedinja can still find niche uses for itself. In the Ubers tier, Shedinja is strangely good at walling certain legendaries. Shedinja is famously a good matchup against Kyogre. Kyogre's moveset usually consists of a water-type attack like Water Spout, Surf, or Scald, coverage in the form of Thunder, and Ice Beam, and then something like Calm Mind, maybe a second water-type attack that's more accurate or more consistent. So often, Kyogre just has nothing to hit Shedinja. None of those types are super effective against Shedinja and will therefore deal 0 damage to it. So it doesn't matter if a Kyogre has boosted up to maximum boosts with Calm Mind, it can't touch Shedinja. Kyogre can only defeat Shedinja with Toxic, which is not the most common option on it. It's sometimes seen, but many Kyogre sets are hard-walled by Shedinja, and this gives Shedinja a bit of value in Ubers. Shedinja is also good against the Lati twins, who commonly do not have anything to hit Shedinja with their movesets consisting of Thunder, Ice Beam, Dragon-type attacks. sometimes Surf. Perhaps they will have hidden power Fire. This is the one thing that could possibly hit Shedinja, but often they have nothing for Shedinja. Shedinja also has a bit of niche value in Gen 7 OU as a Pokemon on stall teams, because Gen 7 OU is quite an aggressive metagame that happens to have a lot of things with limited options to hit Shedinja. Mega Metacham commonly has movesets consisting of, for example, Fake Out, High Jump Kick, Zen Headbutt, and Thunder Punch, and none of those types hit Shedinja. Tapu Koko cannot really hit Shedinja unless it's carrying the niche Brave Bird, which is not the most common option on it. Mega Swampert can't touch Shedinja, with its moveset consisting of Water, Ground, and Ice type attacks. Actually, a lot of Pokemon in Gen 7 OU in particular are struggling to hit Shedinja. There's also a lot of choice users that lock into moves that Shedinja can then punish, as they cannot switch moves in this case, and are therefore totally destroyed by Shedinja coming in, being immune, and spreading Burn. Now, all of these Shedinja use cases are extremely niche, I must clarify. Even in the Ubers formats where Shedinja sees occasional use, it is a pretty risky thing to run. Many things can still eliminate Shedinja easily in a single hit, especially Spikes or Stealth Rock. Those are the big ones. You need very reliable hazard clearing to even consider Shedinja. You probably need reliable forms of weather clearing so that you don't die to sand or hail. And you need to be careful about knowing which things that you hard wall. If something that you think that you hard wall suddenly clicks toxic against you, your days are numbered. So you're going to be very careful using Shedinja, but such a polarizing Pokemon with complete immunity to so many things can find uses for itself. It's certainly an interesting Pokemon design that captures people with its uniqueness. It's often talked about. It's a famous Pokemon. As far as ZU ranked Pokemon goes, Shedinja is probably among the most well-known and the most celebrated for its truly one-of-a-kind identity. Now, I must say, folks, a lot of you guys ridicule me and mock me for how I pronounce Groudon. Okay, but many of you are also doing something terrible. You're doing something awful. And you are calling Shedinja on the screen here. You are calling him Shed Ninja. This is a very common mistake people make. They call this guy Shed Ninja. And yet in the same breath they malign me for calling the guy Groudon. At least I am not adding a new letter to the guy's name from thin air. Where did the N come from? You added the N into this Pokemon's name and turned him into a ninja. When there was no precedent for such a thing. At least I can read. At least I look at what's in front of me and try to pronounce it. And there's words like crouton, for example. Crouton, which might be a precedent for how I pronounce Groudon. Okay, this might be a precedent. There's no precedent for adding the letter N to Shed Ninja. He's not even really a ninja. More like a little angel bug. Is it supposed to evoke a ninja? Doesn't really have ninja qualities in my opinion. Okay, folks, I've just done some research, and it would seem that in the Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon game, Shedinja himself actually says the following quote. He says this: "Here comes Shedinja, the Shed Ninja. All or nothing, that's my motto." So he actually refers to himself as the Shed Ninja. So I suppose there is actually a precedent, legally speaking, for you to refer to Shedinja as Shed Ninja if you want. But I would say that you have to put a space in between Shed and Ninja, as Shedinja himself did in his official transcript, if you do so, okay? So just keep that in mind, please. I would consider Hawlucha to be a one-trick bird. Hawlucha is a very cool Pokemon design, I think, but not one with much variety in how it can be used. Hawlucha leans towards a specific thing on a specific sort of team. When you look at Hawlucha, it's a fighting, flying type Pokemon, which is a great dual combo. And it has the ability Unburden, which is a great offensive ability that doubles your speed on held item lost. So if your item is consumed, like a berry or a focus sash, once it's consumed, once you've lost the item, or the item is knocked off, you will have your speed doubled. And this can be outstanding because with double speed, it's a significant speed increase and you probably outrun the entire game. Hawlucha is quite fast with 118 base speed. That's a fast Pokemon. So Hawlucha usually leans towards specifically being a late game sweeper Pokemon on terrain teams, because the most reliable way to activate Unburden for Hawlucha is with these terrain seeds, like the Electric Seed, for example. The electric seed will be consumed instantly if electric terrain is active, and upon consumption it will grant the holder 1 defense boost. There are similar seeds for grassy terrain and psychic terrain and misty terrain. Now you could in theory use Hawlucha as an unburdened sweeper in other ways with items like Citrus Berry or Focus Sash, but the terrain seeds are the most consistent and best way to take advantage of Hawlucha and its ability Unburden because they consume reliably. You switch in and it instantly eats the seed, and not only that, it gives you a defensive boost, and this can actually enhance your odds to find an opportunity to boost up with Swords Dance. For this reason, you will pretty much never see a Hawlucha set that has something other than a terrain seed. This is the primary way to abuse Hawlucha. So if you're not running a terrain setter, and you're not a hyper-offense terrain team, you're not going to see Hawlucha. This is all it really does. Hawlucha also leans towards these same sorts of movesets. It needs Sword Dance, of course, to sweep with. Acrobatics is a auto-include, since it is a flying-type physical attack that doubles if you have no held item. Perfect when your whole game plan is you losing your held item. So it's just a great attack, with a 110 power when doubled. Then you want Fighting Stab. High Jump Kick is the best option in earlier gens, but in Gen 9 I believe Hawlucha has Close Combat, which is the new option, but same concept behind that, just a fighting type attack. And then there is some variety in the 4th move, but these 3 moves are the real meat and potatoes of the set. These are the main things you're clicking. The 4th move is Substitute, perhaps, just to shield you from maybe an incoming status move, maybe to just give you a free turn with which to scout the enemy and see whether you can afford to Swords Dance in that case. Another option might be Stone Edge for rock coverage, which hits some things that the flying fighting combination cannot hit. So Hawlucha is just used as a terrain sweeper specifically with Unburden. However, in Gen 7, this specific role was enough to make Hawlucha an OU ranked Pokemon. In the specific Gen 7 environment, Hawlucha was extremely consistent at being an effective offensive Pokemon because terrain was at an all-time high. This is when the Tapu Pokemon were introduced to the game, and the Tapu Pokemon are incredibly powerful central forces that all set a different kind of terrain. So running a terrain setter is not really a specific team choice that's more niche. Most teams will actually have a terrain setter, so it's very common and easy to activate Hawlucha's ability via a terrain seed, because you're probably going to be running a terrain Pokemon. Most teams will have one. This would change though in later generations when terrain was not as ubiquitous as it was when the Tapus were present. In Gen 9, Hawlucha is primarily used alongside Rillaboom, who's the best terrain setter, and is a very good Pokemon ranked in OU, but is not quite on every single team the way that the Tapus were. So now using Hawlucha is a bit more of a specific choice alongside the Rillaboom. But in that role, it can still work in OU and be a viable Pokemon. It is still outrunning the entire metagame after its Unburden boost. It still has that excellent stab combination, and it even has Encore as a utility option, which is quite good in the Gen 9 metagame specifically, as a form of counterplay to things like Thunderclap and enemy setup moves, which are very prominent. So I would say Hawlucha is an example of a rather effective one-trick pony as well. It may only do one thing, but that one thing is a pretty good thing. What an incredible sentence I just said. What a sentence, Jim. This is why people watch. This is the analysis they come for. He does one thing, and that thing is a good thing, okay? That's a smart thing to say, actually. What if the thing was a bad thing? Then he wouldn't be used. It's a good thing he does. If you only do one thing, it better be good, okay? I'm not stupid for saying it. It was a smart thing to say, folks. I am legally mandated to once again speak about Dracovish in this video, folks. Forgive me. Forgive me, we're discussing Dracovish again, but is this not one of the most one-trick pony Pokemon ever created? It cannot be denied. Dracovish exists for one purpose only, and that is to click the move Vicious Rend. This is the only reason Dracovish is any good. Vicious Rend is a water-type attack with 85 power that doubles in power if the user moves before the target. If you're faster or the enemy switches, this move has an absurd 170 power, and this power is multiplied further by Strong Jaw, which boosts bite-based attacks by 1.5x power, the result being one of the strongest moves in Pokemon history. and such an overwhelming amount of damage output that you don't need any other attacks, and other attacks are marginally useful at best for Dracovish. Because the power is so much that even if you're attacking a resisted target, half of the power of Vicious Rend, due to the resistance, will still be more damage than a super effective non-stab attack would probably be. That's how much this deals, especially if Rain is in the equation. Dracovish is a completely nothing Pokemon in every other regard. Everything about it is rather unremarkable. It is merely access to this single move that elevates it to an Uber's level threat that can one-hit or two-hit just about everything. Dracovish famously mandated water immunity, and if you did not have water immunity on your team, you would be eaten alive by the Dracovish instantly. I will not speak any longer about Dracovish being a one-trick pony. It's quite clear he does one thing, and that's his trick. And that's all he can do, is pull a cheap trick on people. And every second that you speak about Dracovish in a YouTube Pokemon video, he actually grows more powerful in the afterlife. So I don't want to keep empowering Dracovish just because he's such a novel trivia Pokemon to bring up in my videos, and he comes up often because of his extremely polarizing design and the fact that he hilariously clicks a single attack and kills entire teams with it, and he's sort of a weird fossil creature. This lends itself to sort of emerging out of the woodwork to show up in my damned Pokemon analysis videos time and time again. Dracovish, damn you. I will not discuss you any further. We get it, you click Vicious Rend. Why don't you do something else? Can you do anything else, Dracovish? Is there anything else up your sleeve? I don't think so. I don't think you have a single thing to show to the people. And maybe it's good that you're not in Gen 9. Maybe that's okay. Maybe I appreciate that they didn't put you in the game. What would you add? Very little, evidently. Up next we have Indeedee. This Pokemon does one thing primarily, and that is that it sets Psychic Terrain on the field. Psychic Terrain is one of the most powerful terrains when it comes to hyper offense. Not only does it boost the damage of Psychic type attacks and enable Psychic Seed to be consumed, it will also make it so that priority moves have no effect on all of the Pokemon in the field that are grounded. And this is an effect that can really benefit hyper offense teams. Priority moves are a common way to defeat a boost sweeper that is running amok. But Psychic Terrain erases this possibility, so things like Dragonite Extreme Speed and King Gambit Sucker Punch will do nothing now. And this is the main reason that Indeedee exists, is to set Psychic Terrain. It does literally do other things. It has moves that it can select. It has Expanding Force, which does good damage in Psychic Terrain. It's got Healing Wish, just sacrifice itself and heal up an ally. But the primary purpose for Indeedee is to set Psychic Terrain, and that's pretty much it. And this enables certain Psychic Terrain hyper offense teams in Gen 9 OU. And Indeedee is the only option for this. Tapu Lele is no longer in the game. Tapu Lele would be the premier choice if it was. Indeedee is the best you've got. You wouldn't think that this small, unassuming creature would be the enabler for perhaps the most aggressive playstyle in competitive singles. Psychic Terrain hyper offense is an extraordinarily aggressive playstyle that aims to pretty much overwhelm the enemy with big attacks over and over, and shield them from priority. This creature does not look particularly aggressive, but sometimes looks can be deceiving. I suppose the demonic horns could be a giveaway to this Pokemon's true character. It's worth noting as well that I'm talking specifically about competitive singles here. In competitive doubles, Indeedee is a little bit more meritorious. You can't quite call it a one-trick pony in doubles. It's more of a two-trick pony there, because it not only sets Psychic Terrain, which is very good in doubles too, for similar reasons, enabling offense, but in doubles it's even better, not only because your ally can immediately take advantage of the Psychic Terrain, but also you shield your team from Fake Out, which is a more prominent move and form of crowd control in competitive doubles. Also, the move Expanding Force is a far better doubles attack due to it hitting both opponents for massive damage in Psychic Terrain. So there's far more reasons to run Psychic Terrain in doubles. It has way more benefits, but also Indeedee learns Trick Room. In singles, this is not that significant of an option. It might come up sometimes and help you, but in doubles, this is a very significant option that, of course, causes turn order to be reversed for 5 turns, meaning the slower Pokemon will move first in the Trick Room. In doubles, this is way better because speed control is a more central concept. Trick Room effectively cancels out the enemy's Tailwind or other speed boosts,
causes your slow Pokemon to be far more threatening now. And also the fact that you have an ally next to you that can, on the very next turn, start taking advantage of the Trick Room immediately is very powerful too. Doubles is also a more fast-paced format where the limited turns of Trick Room feel more impactful, whereas in singles, they're more easy to maneuver around and wait out. It's not as much the case in doubles. So in doubles, Indeedee is more of a two-trick pony, setting Psychic Terrain and setting Trick Room. But in singles, the main appeal is the Psychic Terrain, which can enable a certain brand of hyper offense. And a Pokemon that is quite related to Indeedee, that I would also describe as a one-trick pony, is Poltegeist. Poltegeist, folks. This is a Pokemon often used in conjunction with Indeedee. Poltegeist is a mono ghost type T-themed Pokemon that seems to be a slow, semi-bulky special attacker. It has all sorts of things in its moveset, but the main reason it is used is as a Shell Smash sweeper. Shell Smash is one of the most powerful boosting moves in the game. It will, in a single turn, enhance your attack, special attack, and speed by 2 stages each, at the cost of lowering your defense and special defense by 1 stage each. Ramping your offensive stats this much in 1 turn is incredible, and this is kind of the only thing Poltegeist does, is exist as a Shell Smash sweeper, especially because it has the lethal combo of both Shell Smash and the move Stored Power. Stored Power is a Psychic-type special attack that ramps in its base power for each stat boost you have. So since Shell Smash immediately gives you a bunch of stat boost, it greatly increases the base power of Stored Power by 20 for each boost. And what's more, you have the ability Weak Armor. If you are struck by a physical attack, your defense gets lowered by 1, but your speed gets raised by 2. Not only is this useful for your sweeping potential to be even faster than you already are after a Shell Smash, but also enhances the power of Stored Power by 40 more base power. Despite perhaps at first seeming like a Pokemon that could do multiple different things, this is all Poltegeist really does, is click Shell Smash and try to sweep enemy teams. And it's even more specific actually than that, because Poltegeist is largely used alongside Indeedee on Psychic Terrain teams. Poltegeist is rarely ever used on its own without the support of Psychic Terrain, so it's specifically a Shell Smash sweeper in Psychic Terrain, really narrowing down the amount of teams it can be used on. But on this type of team, Poltegeist is a very powerful Pokemon. It has Stored Power, which gains a power boost in Psychic Terrain, which is great, but also, since Poltegeist is often relying on the Focus Sash for a free turn to set up Shell Smash, and Shell Smash plus Weak Armor nerf its defenses so significantly, Poltegeist is insanely vulnerable to priority moves. Priority moves kind of end Poltegeist's existence instantly, don't they? If Poltegeist is on 1 HP as a result of the Focus Sash, of course any attack will just KO Poltegeist, but also it's really vulnerable due to all of the defensive debuffs. After all these defensive debuffs, you're likely also dying to any priority move, even if you'd manage to survive on more than 1 HP from an incoming hit on a prior turn. So for this reason, the priority immunity that Psychic Terrain grants is also imperative for Poltegeist and enhances it greatly. It can afford to only be on 1 HP or be as weak as ever, because priority will have no effect, and that is the best way to get merit out of Poltegeist. I would certainly describe this as a one-trick pony, because it only does one thing on a very specific archetype. And its moveset variety is also quite limited. It's inclined to run Shadow Ball for stab, Stored Power for the Psychic Terrain synergy and the boost ramping synergy. And it has one flex slot, often used on the move Giga Drain for some coverage. It could also perhaps run Psy Shock if it likes to hit special walls, and also synergize with Psychic Terrain. But beyond that, there is not very much variety in how Poltegeist is used. It is existing mostly for this one trick. It's a pretty good trick on that specific team. It's one of the defining Pokemon of Psychic Terrain Hyper Offense, in fact. That's where it belongs, and that's where it excels. What an interesting duo Indeedee and Poltegeist. They are 2 one-trick ponies that have found solidarity in their shared, limited options, and have come together to expand their options together to become greater than the sum of their parts. And I view that as quite ingenious. And if you are a person that specializes in a particular skill, the best thing you can do oftentimes is find someone else to fill your own gaps and work with them to maximize synergy. This is exactly what the duo of Indeedee and Poltergeist have accomplished together. How delightful. And Poltergeist, when I pitched him on the idea of this video and asked his permission to be included, he told me that I should make it very clear to the audience that Poltergeist has no relation whatsoever to the future paradox form of itself, Iron Mugulus, who is a known criminal and a very controversial Pokemon. Poltergeist would like it to be very clear that they have no relation, and Poltergeist does not support the actions of Iron Mugulus or endorse him in any way. Now, I personally do have to wonder, Poltergeist, if this is your future paradox form, does this not imply that in the future you will become Iron Mugulus? Is this like a Netflix's Dark situation where you cannot possibly envision yourself becoming the villain in the future, but in fact you cannot change the tides of time, and in time you will become Iron Mugulus, and your fate is predetermined in the tapestry woven by the fates themselves, and you have no power or free will to change that, Poltergeist? I don't know. I don't know if maybe you do have free will and you can change the future as Iron Mugulus from a branching timeline. I don't know. But at the moment, it doesn't look very good for you, Poltergeist. I would be very careful of your incoming peril of perhaps transforming into a supervillain. I would say that Dondozo is the biggest one-trick pony in all of Gen 9 OU. Dondozo was a powerful Pokemon, one of the strongest new defensive Pokemon introduced. But its options are extremely limited, and it pretty much only does one thing. Dondozo is a mono water type with excellent defensive stats, a very high HP and defense. It has the amazing ability Unaware, which ignores stat stage changes when taking or doing damage. So a boosted up opponent will do damage as if it had no boosts at all. A very powerful ability that is excellent against Dragon Dance Sweepers, Swords Dance Sweepers, etc. But the thing about Dondozo is that its options are extraordinarily limited. Even other Unaware walls, despite being similarly specific in what they do, have options like Recover or Toxic to apply poison to enemies, a great option on defensive walls, Will-O-Wisp to apply burn. Dondozo has none of that. It has no good healing move besides Rest, which is not the best move to rely on, puts you to sleep for 2 turns. Has no status-inflicting moves. It really has no fantastic way to leverage its excellent defensive qualities, besides just sort of chipping away at you with a stab waterfall, which is not the best thing ever. It does at least have Curse, which is a boosting move that increases its attack and defense, but it's not like it's an outstanding Curse sweeper or anything. It's a very passive Pokemon, very easy to force out, threaten. Really, Dondozo exists for one purpose, and that is to hard wall physical attackers. Despite having such limited options, Dondozo's sheer bulk and the complete unawareness it has towards enemy boosts means Dondozo can just sit there against just about any physical attacker in the whole game and stonewall them, prevent them from sweeping. All Dondozo has to do is exist, and they are kind of forced out. They will not win the 1v1 because Dondozo is too bulky. And that's what it exists for, to wall things. Its actual moveset variety is very limited. This is usually the most common moveset, but you can, for example, run Wave Crash instead of Waterfall for a bit more water-type damage at the cost of some recoil. If you like, you can also run, instead of a water-type attack, you could run Body Press, which leverages your high defense for offense and is fighting coverage as well. And perhaps some sets drop Curse in favor of Avalanche, which is at least an ice-type attack that can deal some damage to Dragonite, for example. It's a bit of coverage, but really, the actual moveset here is quite irrelevant. I mean, most things in the game get Rest, Sleep, Talk, to be honest. Most Pokemon get this. So Dondozo feels like it's working with very little, except for its sheer bulk. And the sheer bulk is the appeal in using it. It is a very one-dimensional Pokemon that only does one thing, and that is ruin the lives of physical attackers. But it does that job so well that it's OU ranked and is a staple of stall teams and defensive teams. And is the most reliable answer to physical attackers maybe that we've ever seen. It's incredibly
incredibly bulky with the high HP and defense and unaware. This combo alone is enough to absolutely hard carry Dondozo into viability. It's even utilized sometimes in the Ubers tier to wall legendary physical attackers. It's that good at it. Not even legendarios can power through a Dondozo. It's that defensively excellent. And finally, we of course must speak about the actual pony who is a one-trick pony, that being Spectria. Spectria is a horse Pokemon. A pony is a baby horse, isn't it? So Spectria was, at least once in its life, a pony in a former time. It has grown into a horse over time, it's now a one-trick horse, but something that has remained consistent about it is that it only has a single trick up its sleeve. It's a very limited Pokemon. Spectria is an Ubers-ranked legendary. It's a ghost horse with excellent offensive stats, has 145 special attack and 130 speed. This is incredible stuff. So these stats, plus the ability Grim Neigh, which grants special attack +1 on Pokemon KO, are an incredible combo in theory. This looks like an S-tier Pokemon through and through, but there's one problem, and that is the fact that Spectria's attacking options are insanely limited. Spectria is kind of just a Shadow Ball merchant. Shadow Ball is at least Ghost Stab. It's probably the best possible, or one of the best possible special attacks it could learn, but beyond Shadow Ball, it has very little else to speak of. In fact, why don't we search for special attacks in Spectria's moveset? What comes up? We have Dark Pulse, which is very anti-synergistic with Ghost, because Ghost already hits all the types that Dark hits super effectively. Dark only has the advantage of hitting some things neutrally that Ghost does not. But it's a marginal benefit as a coverage option. It's got Hex, which is also a Ghost-type special attack. At least it does something else, but it's not exactly complementing Shadow Ball, is it? And then we've got Mud Shot. We have Snarl, which is nothing. Swift Uproar, like the options here are terrible. Hyper Beam might be considerable just to do something, but Spectria's special attacking move pool is one of the most limited ever. It's kind of unbelievable. Spectria pretty much just exists to click Shadow Ball, and the problem of course with that is that if anything is immune to or resists Ghost, they will destroy Spectria. So Spectria has a strange existence. In a way it's similar to Dracovish in that it is very overwhelmingly powerful at selecting a specific type of attack. Its stats and high speed and special attack and ability are clearly on their own quite overwhelming for the OU power level, but it's sort of balanced by the fact that it only has one real attacking type. But of course, the Pokemon was a bit too polarizing to exist in OU anyway in Gen 8, and was eventually banned, partially because people started running sets with Leftovers and Nasty Plot substitute Will-O-Wisp and Hex, which is a set that is a lot more functional. Will-O-Wisp at least does something to things that can't be hit by Ghost. Nasty Plot allows you to power through resistances. So does Grim Neigh, with Will-O-Wisp Hex dealing overwhelming damage. So with this set, Spectria could actually power through some of its checks like Mandibuzz and defeat them over time, and was therefore banished to Ubers. And in Ubers, this is not really a very good Pokemon. In Gen 8, it's of course outclassed by Calyrex Shadow Rider, who is a superior version of the same Pokemon. And in Gen 9, it at least has now a little bit more to do. They gave it another attack in the form of Draining Kiss, which is actually quite a good one, a form of fairy coverage, which can hit things that Ghost cannot hit. And Terrestrialization also gives Spectria more to do, but overall still not a very powerful Pokemon in Gen 9. Ubers still a bit limited. I feel like Spectria purely exists to form the monster that is Calyrex Shadow Rider through fusion and animal husbandry, rather than being a valid entity itself. It's very limited, but when fused with Calyrex, with a intelligent entity riding the horse, combining their abilities, it becomes an extraordinarily powerful being. But without that, it is a bit more limited, just like a horse wandering aimlessly in the wilderness, having to brave the elements and survive in harsh environments. Thank you for watching, folks. Let me know any one-trick ponies that I missed. I'm sure there are more examples from all sorts of different tiers and formats that I'm less familiar with. You let me know, and thank you very much for watching.